Hello there, and welcome to Cityline. Yep, we're zooming from my kitchen into your home or office, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. We have a great hour ahead of us. Later on, we'll be talking with Grit City Trees. Did you know we had Grit City Trees? Well, we do. And we have help in terms of planting them and also financial assistance. Forterra will be here to talk about conservation and investment in the Hilltop community. They have recently developed the corner where Fab 5 is, and it is beautiful. So you definitely want to hang in there for that segment. League of Women Voters of Tacoma, Pierce County is here. Cynthia will be here to talk about some of the new initiatives that they are working on and how they are lowering barriers to make sure that all of us can exercise our right to vote. The Humane Society will be here with our Pet of the Week. And with me right now are two people that I'm actually seeing more than I'm seeing anybody else right now. And that has a lot to do with our community. We're going to talk about the eviction moratorium and also get a legislative update. Please join me in welcoming back Lori Davenport. You are the Director of Development and Outreach for Tacoma Pro Bono. Welcome, my dear.
Thank you, Amanda. We're so happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. And yeah, like we said, we like that urban background behind you.
Couldn't get more urban than our location. Nope.
It really doesn't, unless Lori is sketching in Wright Park, which she does quite often.
Yes.
Mark Morzal, you sleepy man, you are the managing attorney for the Housing Justice Program. And the reason why I say sleepy is because you can get by on 5 hours of sleep, which is amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it, Amanda? It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you as well. So let's jump in. Mark, my first kind of question for you, because every time I have you and Lori on, we kind of recap where we were, and then we talk about what's changed, and then what to expect. So Governor Inslee recently issued a new bridge proclamation about the eviction moratorium. Did the moratorium end, or is it still in effect, Mark? And how does the CDC moratorium fit in also?
That's a great question. So the simplest way of thinking about it is that the moratorium did end. The moratorium ended on June 30th. That is officially over. Prior to the moratorium ending, the Washington State Legislature passed several laws relating to housing, residential housing, including House Bill 1236 and Senate Bill 5160. In order to get to House Bill 1236 and Senate Bill 5160, once the moratorium ended, then the governor issued what's called a bridge proclamation. That's effective from July 1st until the end of September. And this bridge is quite literally meant to transition that period from the old into the new and not make it so abrupt. To start transitioning into Senate Bill 5160 and the protections that tenants have. The second part of your question about the CDC moratorium, that's entirely different. That's the federal CDC moratorium, which was issued by the president, and that is in effect now until October 30th. So that was issued on August 3rd, and is in effect until October 3rd.
Well said. So let's talk about those tenants who owe rent due to COVID. Are they still protected?
Yeah, it's a huge question, not just for tenants, but for landlords alike. And yes, tenants still do have protections, and they have protections in two different ways. The first one is under the bridge moratorium, which requires a certain amount of additional process for landlords to do prior to seeking an eviction for non-payment of rent that was due during COVID. And those additional protections include the landlord has to offer a tenant a reasonable repayment plan. If the landlord and tenant cannot reach a reasonable repayment plan, the landlord has to proceed through a process called the Eviction Resolution Pilot Program, which is known as the ERPP. So those protections exist in the bridge proclamation. And so those provide some protections to tenants right there, some additional process that landlords have to do. On the federal side of things, we've mentioned the CDC moratorium. That provides additional protections for tenants and actually stops the eviction process for tenants whose income individually is under $99,000 a year and had decreased income during the COVID period. And it's not necessarily because they had COVID, but any of those ramifications that arose through COVID. The CDC moratorium could press the pause button on those evictions until October 3rd. So some of these evictions can proceed under the bridge proclamation, and some of them are paused under the federal CDC proclamation, or moratorium, I should say. That's more officially a moratorium.
Wow. So Lori, given that, there's a couple of options here, and I'm so grateful for the two of you that can make this feel plain speak. What is your best advice right now for tenants who owe rent and landlords who want to get paid?
First of all, apply for rental assistance. Pierce County is, I'm thinking, I've heard this in a couple of places, we are the place in the whole country that has been the first to really roll out rental assistance to people who live here who need help. We are doing a fantastic job. Human Services is just awesome. So apply. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. It takes, I don't know where we are exactly right now, but it's a couple of months. Where landlords are going to be nervous, tenants are going to be nervous. What's happening is it just takes a while because the rental assistance has to go through community organizations. It's a lot of documentation. Be patient, gather it, and stay where you are. Stay in your place, because if you leave, you can't take advantage of rental assistance and the landlord isn't going to get paid. So it's in everybody's best interest just to stay put and let things happen.
Stay put, be patient, and get a hold of Mark and Lori. That's kind of what I've distilled the three things down to. Mark, what are the steps a landlord will need to take to evict a tenant under the new laws passed by the legislature?
Yeah, so that's going to depend largely on the type of eviction, the reason for the eviction. So if the landlord is alleging non-payment of rent, then there's a number of additional steps that need to be taken under Senate Bill 5160 and the Bridge Proclamation. Those include offering the tenant a reasonable repayment plan. Senate Bill 5160 sets certain limits on the repayment plan, including it could only be up to 1/3 of the monthly rent. So landlords need to pay attention to those requirements. If the tenant and the landlord cannot reach a reasonable repayment plan, then the landlord has to go through the ERPP process. And that's where the tenant and the landlord come together and try to work out their differences. So those are the additional steps for non-payment of rent. When it comes to the evictions that are based on other reasons other than non-payment of rent, so breach of lease terms, unauthorized occupants, perhaps a tenant is causing a nuisance, things like that can proceed like normal evictions can. And the Bridge Proclamation allows that to happen. The real protections are for the non-payment of rent cases. The other types of evictions, landlords are going to be pretty familiar with the process for those.
So Mark, what about raising rent and charging late fees? What kind of protection or what's happening in that arena?
Yeah, and that's an issue that's going to come to the forefront here really fast, because the moratorium that was in place for 18 months froze any sort of rent increase. And so now landlords, we've seen the housing market here locally in Pierce County. Landlords are, eager to raise rent. And tenants never want to see their rent raised. Some are living on very fixed incomes. What the Bridge Proclamation does is it lifted that freeze that the moratorium had on rent increases. So now landlords are able to increase rent again. However, they are still bound by Washington state law that provides certain restrictions on the amount of rent increase, and including the time frame. Tenants must be given at least 60 days written notice prior to any rent increase by a landlord. So that is where the tenants are at now. Is tenants and landlords are both at just regular Washington law as far as rent increases go, because the Bridge Proclamation allows these to begin again.
Boy, it is such a lesson in navigating the gray when you start talking about raising and rent and late fees, which brings me, Lori, to is Tacoma Pro Bono's Housing Justice Project ready with that right to counsel cases under the new laws, and how will that work? And when we say right to counsel, that means tenants are saying, hey, I need someone to represent me.
That's right. The new law says anyone who is indigent, who is facing an eviction hearing, is entitled to representation. by our Housing Justice Project. And that's the pieces of that are being put together, but we are ready to help people now. Housing Justice Project actually now has its own address, which is awesome. So we've hired a number of really incredible attorneys. So we are ready, and we want people to be aware of it, because Washington is the first state in the union to have this for the whole state. It's just a huge piece of progress for us. So we want people to know about it. We want you to know we're here. We want you to know we've got your back, and contact us.
So when I say that you've been singing that from the rooftops, I want to talk about Tacoma Pro Bono worked with Tacoma Refugee Choir, which who doesn't love Tacoma Refugee Choir, and Stressed Out Entertainment, I love that phrase, to create a compelling music video about eviction of all things. Why not? In my day and age, we learned about conjunctions and things like that through music. So where can we find this video, Lori?
Yes, go watch the video. It's awesome. It's a good place to get it is off of our homepage. The song is called We've Got Your Back, and it's just right there in the middle of our homepage. If you click on that and click there, you will get to YouTube and you can watch and listen.
I love that. Well, we've been showing the website across both of your faces in a ticker, so people know how to get a hold of you. And there's also a telephone number they can call as well if they don't have a computer, because Tacoma Pro Bono is all about lowering barriers. Thank you, both of you, so very much for taking the time to do this. You probably have at least 5 voicemails in this short time that we've been together that you have to answer. So I thank you so very much, and please take care of yourselves because we need you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks so much, Amanda.
You're more than welcome. Well, it is time for our Humane Society of Tacoma Pierce County Pet of the Week. Julie, who do you have that needs a forever home?
Hi, Amanda. I have Fluffernut here. This sweet little girl you'll see. She is very, very fluffy. She's also an active little gal. I can see if I can wrangle her over here. She is just 10 months old. There she is. She is a sweet, fluffy little gal. She's a bit on the shy side, so you might see her bounce around a little bit. But she is a beautiful girl, and she just needs a little time and patience probably in her new household. She definitely likes pets, but not so much being picked up. So just give her a little bit of time, and she is a sweet little angel. Look at that fluff. How can you say no to that, you know? And of course, all of our buns come spayed or neutered, and they even come microchipped, and they also have their up-to-date vaccines like flea treatment, just like all the dogs and cats do. And if you're interested in Fluffernut or anybody else here at the shelter, you can definitely check out our website, thehumanesociety.org. You're more than welcome to come on down here. We're now open to the public to look around. We're open 7 days a week from 11 to 6 down at 2608 Center Street.
Welcome back to Cityline. With me, I have somebody who, well, you will recognize because she's been on the show before. And boy, she packs a political punch. I'm going to tell you who she is in a second. She is the president of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma Pierce County. Cynthia Stewart, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.
It's great to have you here, and the knowledge about how our democracy works is unparalleled when it comes to the League of Women Voters. So first off, what does the phrase empowering voters, defending democracy mean, Cynthia?
Well, first of all, that is the current mission statement for the League of Women Voters nationally, and we've adopted it obviously locally as well. And it actually began with the formation of the League back in 1920. The League was formed by suffragists who fought to get women to vote. And once that happened, they wanted to be sure that voters would be well informed. So in these days, the League stands for making sure that voter enfranchisement remains very broad. And the theory is that our democracy won't work if we don't have informed voters with good access to voting. And so since we are strictly nonpartisan, we can work towards processes that ensure democracy for all. So we're empowering voters by giving them good information and defending democracy by making sure that everybody has access.
Beautifully said. And boy, when you think about this last year with our presidential election and all of the election issues that went on, it is a comfort to have the League of Women Voters there to educate and to remove barriers and to say, now exercise your right to vote. So how is the League organized, Cynthia?
Well, we actually have 3 levels. We have a national league, a state league, and then local leagues. The national league is basically a board that's elected by the membership at a convention. The state league is also a board that's elected at the state convention. And then most of the work goes on at the local leagues. So we're organized almost entirely by county. And this is true in most states as well as Washington. So the boards of directors at the state and the national levels, they can set policies and advocate at their levels. And then local leagues are typically all volunteers who do the on the ground work like voter registration, get out the vote, candidate forums, and that kind of thing. I want to talk about advocacy just a minute. So what we do is we do in-depth studies. We do them at the national level where they recruit members from all over the country to participate, and at the state level similarly, and then we do them at the local level. What those studies do is provide information for the public and the league about the issue that's being studied. Just as an example, this last year we did one on the public health department because of the issue that came up with Pierce County and Tacoma Public Health Department. Other examples are studies that we've done on mental health in Pierce County. We've done a study on the county budget, financial situation, and so forth. Those studies allow us as members then to come to consensus around what positions we should take. And that policy that we adopt is called a position. And then we get to advocate, or I would call it even lobby, for anything consistent with that position. So our local league has lobbied the Pierce County Council, for example, on the mental health tax that they ultimately adopted about a year ago. Similarly, on homelessness, we have national and state positions on housing and homelessness. So we've taken those and we're working with those locally as well. So at the national level, we don't get to operate there. And at the state level, we don't get to operate there. But we can take their positions and do whatever we can locally.
Well, it's like our auditor, Julie Anderson, always says, so much is determined at the local level. And that's where you really need to be involved and educated. Now, you mentioned housing, you mentioned the health department within the Pierce County. Well, what other issues has the league prioritized this year?
Well, this year we adopted 3 specific goals, and we use those goals to both frame our workload for the year, and also if something unexpected comes along, we use those goals to determine if it's appropriate for us to take up or not. So the first one is defend democracy and advocate for equity through voter services. So that's consistent with our mission. You'll see the equity theme here, because the second one is advocate for environmental justice in local policies and regulations. And then the third one is advocate to achieve shelter for all. And we've been working very hard on the homelessness issue for a number of years now. So whenever something comes up, we will go to those goals and we will say, does this comply? Is this consistent? And then if so, we'll go ahead and take it on.
You know, back when, before COVID, when we had a lot of different activities that could educate us about how to vote, I saw the league always with tables being, registering. There was so many things that activities that the league did in our community. So how has that changed now that we are dealing with the Delta variant, and just as we thought we were almost back into normal, Cynthia?
Well, that is a really good question. We had started going back to we had planned to go back to our in-person unit meetings, which are local level meetings of our league members at different parts of the county. And we use those meetings to talk about issues and get acquainted with each other locally. We had to cancel that, and we're going back to our virtual meetings, which are less than satisfactory for many of our members. In terms of voter registration, we're going to be doing some programs in the schools and the high schools. So that can still be done in person under those conditions. We are doing less voter registration now because so many people are registered. We're shifting our focus to getting out the vote and trying to figure out ways to actually motivate people through various social media and other kinds of strategies to get them to actually exercise their vote. So those are the things that we're doing now in light of the Delta variant.
You know, Cynthia, you totally took me down memory lane when you said high school, because I was an 18-year-old in the September of my high school year back in 1982. Yeah, I've dated myself. There was an election in November of 1982, and I will never forget voting. I had been waiting forever to vote because my family holds that in high esteem. And I just can't even comprehend that the seniors that you're going into and getting them registered, they don't know what they're in for, just the privilege and the honor of checking those boxes.
No kidding. Yeah, it is an honor and a privilege, and we don't want to lose that privilege, so we need to use it.
That's right. So who is eligible to join the League of Women Voters? Is it only women?
Oh, heavens no. So to join the league, anybody who's 16 and older, and it can be men as well as women. We have a number of men who join, and we have some men on our board, so, and have had for a number of years. So anybody 16 and older.
So 16 and older, are there any other requirements to join?
Pay the dues. That is it. Just fill out a form saying you want to be a member, send us your dues. Now, we do have a student rate, which is only $10, and that should be pretty affordable. And we also have scholarship opportunities. So if somebody wants to join and they don't have the $75, which is the regular annual dues, they can apply for a scholarship, and that information is kept confidential.
Okay, but on the website, I'm sure there's more information that would lead you further to getting information about a scholarship. So you've talked about the goals of the League of Women Voters, the 3 goals, and what I was hearing was it was so connected about removing barriers and really getting information out so people can make informed choices. What forums is the League organizing for this fall 2021?
We have a lot of forums coming up, and I'm very excited about this fall. So first of all, we have 23 separate events coming up between September and November. And that includes 9 candidate forums with TV Tacoma, which actually, it doesn't include those. In addition to those, then we have 14 virtual forums for candidates outside of Tacoma. And then we have 3 additional city races that we're co-sponsoring that are duplicates of the ones on TV Tacoma, but they're going to be directed specifically at affordable housing and homelessness issues. And that's in conjunction with the Tacoma Pierce County Affordable Housing Consortium. And then we have a forum series coming up beginning on September 15th called Racism Evolution, History to Hope. And this is a series that will have we'll have 5 different cultural categories in which people will talk about both history and their personal experiences with racism in this area. And then the 6th one has to do with hope, which is based on a principle or a practice that an organization called Kids at Hope has started. And the concept is that if you give people hope, miraculous things happen. And so we're going to try and apply that concept to what happens in the racism category and give people a way to move forward. So I'm very excited about that. And those co-sponsors are the Tacoma Area NAACP and also an organization called Vibrant Schools. if I have more time, I want to talk about some other stuff that we do. Is that
You
possible?
do. You have about a minute, my dear.
Oh, ouch. Okay. I don't know if I can much in that time. So I don't know if people know that we have an election observer program that people can join who are not league members. And it's a way to watch the ballot counting and validate the process. We also have a local government observer program where people, league members, watch meetings or go to meetings and then write them up. So city councils and school boards can report on what's going on there. And so let's see, what else do I have here? Well, I've already mentioned homelessness that we're working on intensively. So
Absolutely. Cynthia, I want to say thank you so much to you and to the League for providing such a sense of secure knowledge. As we've said, the League doesn't endorse candidates. The League gives us all the information we need to make an educated choice. And I thank you so much for all that you do. And I especially for this new focus you have of removing barriers. Because let me tell you something, it's the old Benjamin Franklin saying of bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote. So thank you, Cynthia, so much for providing such a great platform for us.
well, I want to say thank you also to you for letting me come here today. And I just want to acknowledge that this is all because of our members who are incredible volunteers. So they get all the credit.
Well, a huge thank you to your members as well.
Thank you.
We have much more to come on Cityline. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this quick message. Welcome back to Cityline. With me, I have an individual that if you have been driving around Hilltop, sampling all the good food, and if you're me, it's the Johnson's candy that you're really going for on Hilltop. You will have seen Forterra, and it's signs everywhere. So let's find out what this is all about. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Bushy. You are the Managing Director of Community Development Real Estate Transactions for Forterra. Welcome to Cityline.
Thanks, Amanda. Happy to be here.
Well, that's a lot to put on a business card, isn't it?
It really is. I usually just shorten it to Rebecca with Forterra Community Development.
Well, Rebecca with Forterra Community Development, happy day that you're here. Tell us first off, what and who is Forterra? What does it do?
Sure. Forterra is actually a non-traditional land trust. So it's been around for a little more than 30 years. And for most of that time, really about 25 of them, Forterra was working primarily in conservation and policy, urban parks, preservation of farmlands and wildlands. But for the last 5 years, Forterra has started using those skills that we developed as a community land trust and start to bring that into urban communities and working on the preservation of land for attainable housing. And in fact, working to develop attainable housing.
Rebecca, what a whiplash to go from urban farms. I think about all the beautiful farmlands around here, little forests, and then woof, right into Hilltop. What made Forterra turn their head and say, maybe we should start looking someplace else as opposed to our urban roots?
Well, you know, we see it as intricately connected. It's all part of a sustainable future for all of us. Where people live is very connected to where nature resides, but also looking at ways to make sure that people have healthy places to live in urban centers so that there's not sprawl that goes out into the countryside, and looking at a way to make sure that people in all settings have equality and have equity.
So let's talk about equality and equity when it comes to real estate and development, because that is a fairly new concept when we think about the history of our world. We're just now starting to jump into the equity of development. So what is that, Rebecca?
Well, it's certainly bigger than me, bigger than you. I think it's best to look at it as an example. So when you look at a community like Hilltop, where there's been a lot of pressures put on that community, both by government policy, by racism, by the impacts of drugs and policing, all of that has impacted this community and impacted, in fact, the residents' ability to own property. And owning property, as we know, is really the foundation of economic equity. So what we're trying to do is create more options for home ownership. This is, if home ownership can be provided to people who live in Hilltop, especially people of color who live in Hilltop, and especially Black folks who live in Hilltop, that is a way to help them have a foothold against rapid displacement, but also against economic recovery.
So let's talk about the community design and when does the project start, and is there an end date?
Mm-hmm. So that's a big question, Amanda. We actually purchased the property in 2019, late in the year. And since then, we've been working with the community directly to design what this development will be. So when we come in, one of the reasons I think we were invited in is we don't just come in and have our plan all set and just drop it down on the community. It's a process we partner in. And we've been working particularly with Fab 5 on a process of community-driven design through their Design the Hill 11th and MLK initiative for over a year now, almost 2 years. So your question is, when will we start? When will we end? We're in concept design now. We will likely break ground in 2023, and we'll complete a year and a half or so later. We're planning to build, between 250 and 300 new homes on that site. It's an entire city block. And if you've been out there recently, you'll see that the old, we won't call it Rite Aid again in this interview, but the old Rite Aid building that's at 11th and MLK, it's really been reclaimed by the community. There's beautiful murals on the outside of the building. That's something particularly that the Community Investment Council, which is our advisory team of residents, really wanted to see this site come back to life. And boy, do you see it now. The murals on the outside, kids having camps on the inside. There's a Buy to Black business market on the weekend. It's really something that's become a community hub. And this, I hope, is an example now of what you're going to see when there's new buildings there later.
That's so impressive. And you're right. That area, for as long as I have been in the Hilltop area, the past, 20 years, that corner has looked different almost every single time I get out of my car. But now it looks the best because of the murals, because of the energy going on. Rebecca, is that a model that Forterra will use elsewhere as it looks at the city of Tacoma?
I think not even just in Tacoma, but throughout the region. There's a lot of things that we're looking at in this development particularly that we hope will be a model that we can use in other communities we're working, but also other developers we hope will use. The model of partnering with community instead of people wondering what's behind that fence and that uninvested area, what's happening, not knowing. Instead of that, having a place for community at the table and developing what that will be. Being able, for us, we're so privileged to be able to listen and partner with community and hear what they do need to grow the vision so that it can respond to that. Of course, we can't do everything that the community needs, but to the extent that we can all be listening and learning from each other, everyone's capacity to do something that will help community grows.
So as you mentioned, everyone's capacity, I want to take you back to the initial stages of this project. What was the response from the community and how did you contact them?
So we were actually invited in by community leaders initially to look at the property. It had been, as you know, an abandoned site for 7 or 8 years since the store had closed. And it was really at risk of a developer coming in and building a market rate development the community would have no part in. So we were actually asked by Keith Blocker, who's now the deputy mayor, then councilman, to look at this and could we help? Could we help acquire this property and secure it for the community? As I said, we acquired it in 2019. We started working immediately with Fab Five, but it took us a while to formalize that partnership, really because this community has reason to distrust. And particularly for Fab Five that had already done work in the Design the Hill initiative, really bringing community to the table of development, they wanted us to go through a process where we really looked at whether our visions were aligned, whether this was actually serving the community. Not that they thought we weren't doing something that was good for community, but whether it aligned with the community work that they're doing. But not only that, we had to come to a deeper understanding about Hilltop and about the pressures, particularly on Black folks in Hilltop. And boy, was that foundation useful, because then we immediately went into COVID and the movement for racial justice. And I've never worked in a community that has experienced so much trauma while we're working together. And yet they continued to show up. You know, we have this advisory group of 15 residents, the Community Investment Council. We met the first time in February of 2020 in person. And then we all know what happened in March. So in April, we spent March figuring out how are we going to continue this work. And we found a way to continue it virtually. It involved making sure everyone had the right technology, that everyone knew how to use it. It involved us getting creative about how we could build our partnership in this realm. And then they helped us with Fab Five to really strategize how would we broaden that in community. And these design labs that we had envisioned as these in-person tactile events, how could we do that? Really we had to start with our community events. We started with just giving a space for community to talk to each other and listen, a place for them to express the stresses they were under. We didn't even talk about the project for 3 or 4 meetings, because really the trauma of the community needed a space. Yes. And then as we started to get into talking about the project, I've never been in a place that has so much energy and devotion to the community. It's really inspiring. People showed up, event after event, and invested and left us their thoughts and ideas and helped us build the vision that could serve their needs. We started to talk a lot more about that commercial space on the ground floor and how that could be a place that could foster businesses that are owned by Black folks and other people of color in the community, how we could work with other organizations to help those businesses be ready when this space is ready. We've partnered with other developers, the Tacoma Housing Authority, COES, as they are growing their developments along MLK, and the city has been amazingly supportive.
I love that.
We're very fortunate. It's been a really positive process.
So Rebecca, in this last 2 minutes, give us an idea of what the final project will look like when it's finished.
That's a great question. So in our last design lab, which was about 2 months ago, we showed the community some concepts for what this could look like. 4 buildings that are built out of cross-laminated timber, which is a beautiful wood product that's sustainable. It embodies carbon. And that space, that having those 4 buildings kind of placed on the site in a way that creates open spaces for the community to move in and through, beautiful commercial spaces along MLK and 11th to really help support the community's thriving business district, and homes above, 5 stories of homes that will be for community residents and those who want to help build up this community together.
Oh, well, I can envision, Rebecca, the ribbon cutting that's going to happen on this. And when you talk about the energy of the coming together of the citizens of Hilltop, I know exactly what you're talking about. It is formidable and it is contagious. So I can imagine you're going to probably celebrate the whole block. But before you do that, I want you to come back on. And I would love to have you bring some of your business, Hilltop Attainable business owners and those who sat on the actual council and asked you to be a part of this, so we get a full view of what this project means to them. And Don't make me chase you, okay?
Absolutely. I would love that, Amanda. And I would love to have the community come and speak to you. I can also share with you a video that we have where the Community Investment Council is really talking about this work and what it means to Hilltop. It's been, and hopefully your viewers can see that too, but it's been a really, every day is an amazing opportunity to work in this community.
Absolutely. Rebecca, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. And I want to have you back on sooner than later, all right?
Sounds great. Have a great day, Amanda.
You too, Rebecca. We have much more to come on Cityline. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to Cityline. Well, as you know, we are known as the Grit City. And we have Grit City t-shirts, we have Grit City pizza, but we also have, and you may not know this, we have Grit City trees. So please join me in welcoming Erin Lewis. You are a urban forestry intern at the city of Tacoma. Welcome to Cityline, Erin.
Thanks, Amanda.
So Erin, before we find out what is the Grit City Tree program, Erin, tell us about how your journey led you to this internship.
Sure. So I joined with the city of Tacoma in 2018 as an AmeriCorps member. I found out about the program and what they were doing with the Office of Environmental Policy and Sustainability. Back at that time after I graduated college. And so I spent just under a year serving as an AmeriCorps for the city, and then was hired on as an intern with the Urban Forestry Group following that. Yeah.
Well, and here you are. So, okay, without much further ado, if I had a drum roll sound, I would put it in there. What is the Grit City Tree program, Erin?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. The Grit City Trees program is a free street tree program for any Tacoma resident with a big emphasis on equity. So we are aware of where there is more or less opportunity for social mobility is one way to put it, or equity. It's measured by the Equity Index, and it was first measured in 2018 by the Kiwan Institute, and we updated that in 2020 here. And so you can find that at the Office of Equity and Human Rights. They have that up online, and we use that tool to measure where we should focus our efforts to replant in Tacoma. And as an interesting kind of effect of the inequities in Tacoma, socially, economically, it's also found in the environment too. So there's more tree canopy cover in the higher opportunity neighborhoods compared to the lower opportunity neighborhoods. So we get a 2-for-1 when we focus on those areas. We get to replant the trees, and we are hopefully helping the social aspect too.
So Erin, when we think about, equity, when we think about institutional racism, when we think about Black Lives Matter, to view it through an equity lens and to make trees the target of what you're looking at is unusual, and it's a new education for us. So based upon that, can individuals apply, or can a whole neighborhood, let's say the East Side neighborhood as a group, apply?
Yeah, so short answer is both, but we really want to emphasize the community building possibilities through the program. So group neighborhood applications are great, and we do emphasize that. We put a little bit of preference towards those applications, and we'll offer free delivery of all the trees, all the materials that support those trees, including watering materials, stakes and ties to hold the trees upright for the establishment period, so we can make sure that they're thriving for the long term. But again, the emphasis being on neighborhood groups, so that we can build the community and help to cultivate a thriving canopy.
Yeah, those
one neighborhood at a time.
pockets of equity that we need to see with those trees. So where can these trees be planted, Erin? Because you just can't grab a tree and, put it downtown on a little parking strip across from Tacoma Art Museum.
Sure. So I think one of the things you're getting at there is putting the right tree in the right place. That's hugely important. And so, the street tree program here, the Grit City Trees program is more or less limited to street trees. But that's the whole right of way. And so what that is that's the space between your property boundary and the edge of the street. A lot of times that space looks like the planting strip in between your sidewalk and the street. But there's plenty of houses in Tacoma that don't have a sidewalk either. And so there's still a right-of-way space there. And yeah, I'm happy to work with any individual to figure out how much space there is available there. And sometimes that's a large space, sometimes it's a smaller space. So putting the right tree in the right place comes down to how much size or how much space is available in any given right-of-way.
And most people, if they didn't grow up around trees, or if in the past 10 years where they're living, there are no trees, they wouldn't know how to plant a tree, or maybe even look at the conditions surrounding that tree and say, in 10 years, what will this tree look like in this space? So are only certain parts of Tacoma, Erin, eligible for the free trees that are part of this program?
Well, so all of the city of Tacoma is eligible to apply, but I think, again, we're getting to the right tree, right place conversation. And, part of my job is to try and make sure that we are, planning for the future and, thinking about how big the trees are going to get at maturity. So 10, 20, 30 years down the road is really what we're trying to think about. And so, that affects next generation, and we're trying to think about and have conversations with community members to plan out how that future growth is going to look in every case. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to own a home in the North End that had a huge tree on the parking strip, as it were. And I wish that somebody maybe 50, 60 years ago would have thought about planting that oak tree on just, a welcome mat, because it wasn't meant to be there. And it was an example of a beautiful tree that should not have been planted in that neighborhood. So tell us, when we look at trees, what benefits do trees provide besides just visually looking around and going, wow, we have great trees? Sure.
So, the aesthetic benefits to a neighborhood are great. But there's plenty of unseen benefits too. And one of the biggest ones that we are seeing, or maybe not seeing in certain neighborhoods, is the ability of trees to mitigate the urban heat island effect. Essentially, they kind of act as huge air conditioners.
Yeah.
But, they don't actually consume any energy from our grid, which is a great sidebar. What's happening when you plant a tree in an urban setting is they are shading the impervious dark surfaces like streets, your roof, parking lots even sometimes. And when the sun hits those dark impervious surfaces, they just absorb the heat, and throughout the day and even throughout the night, they slowly re-emit that heat. And in some cases, it's even 14 degrees different Fahrenheit between heavily paved versus heavily treed areas. And so when we're seeing these heat waves that we have been recently, and we're saying that's anything over 88 degrees, I think Fahrenheit is what we're considering a heat wave from now on. And yeah, that's a huge difference in temperature in terms of not only comfort, but health outcomes. That's a lot of stress. And if those heat waves, as they continue, that's continued stress on all the individuals living within those heat islands that have lower tree canopy. And it's an important thing that we want to address for sure.
Erin, as I grew up here and looked back at the summers, we never had a definition of 88 degrees and above was a heat wave because we didn't have heat waves 20, 30 years ago. So based upon just our knowledge now of, global warming, climate change, how does that determine what species are a part of this tree program?
Yeah, so we're always trying to think about what are the species what should be the most appropriate species to plant, not only for the space that's available around Tacoma, but also as our climate changes, we want to have climate adapted species. And, it's always nice to be able to plant native trees. But frankly, it's very hot and it's very dry in Tacoma compared to what those species are adapted to, through time immemorial. And so we're trying to think about what is the new native species that we can plant and, again, cultivate that thriving urban canopy. And so we have a list of pre-approved trees on our website. And, there's a lot of time and thought put into that by yours truly, and others too. I don't want to take full credit actually, but we're trying to think about how we can have a thriving canopy into the future, not just now, but generations to come. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we live in the evergreen state. So, we do have a mantle of beautiful trees that we have to continue to move forward with. Last question for you. What other opportunities are there for tree planting in our area? I mean, I often see Department of Transportation people planting along different side roads or freeways. So what's coming up that we should know about, Erin?
Yeah, so from the city side, we have 2 planting incentive programs. So the Grit City Trees is the one that we want to break down the most barriers again and focus on equity there. But we also have tree coupon program, the tree coupon program, which is $30 off up to 3 trees at local nurseries. And those trees can be planted in your yard as well. So you get a little more freedom of space where you can put it and freedom of choice of the species that are available. So it's whatever the nurseries have. And then I'll put a little plug in for our partnering organizations. So we have in the area, there's Pierce Conservation District. Every year they do an urban tree sale, which is similar to the tree coupons in that it's a heavily discounted tree that you can plant either in your right of way or in your yard. And there's also an awesome organization called Tacoma Tree Foundation. They are doing plant giveaways and sales and engagement around the urban forest as well. And so they're great to look to for all sorts of opportunities. And then lastly, I'll make a plug for Green Tacoma Day, which is the second Saturday every October. And it's a great time for anyone to get out and help control invasive species and plant trees as well on more open spaces.
So, Erin, before I say goodbye to you, tell us, we've been showing the website across the front of your Zoom frame. Is that where we can find out more about these coupons?
Yeah, so if you go to cityoftacoma.org/urban forestry, it has both Grit City Trees program and tree coupons on there, as well as, a whole lot of information on tree planting, tree care, preservation, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So,
Erin, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here and for bringing us such good news. And I want to have you back on as these trees start to maybe turn in the fall, or we start to, if we get snow, how to take care of our brand new trees the first winter. All right?
That sounds great. I can't wait. Thanks for having me, Amanda. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Erin. Well, that wraps up another great segment of Cityline. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to be in your home. We've given you some really great things to think about in this great Grit City. But my first thing I want to say to you is please get yourself vaccinated. Continue to wear masks as the health department dictates. And when you do all of that, then pay it forward and come on back, because we'll be waiting for you right here at Cityline. Take care.
You're from Chicago, but Tacoma's where you'll stay, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home, from the fires to the loan. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home. Tacoma, that's my home, place I call my own. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home. Well, you're from the east end. How you're from Green Bay. How you're from Atlanta, but Tacoma's where you'll stay. Well, you're from the east end. How you're from Green Bay. How you're from Atlanta, but Tacoma's where you'll stay. Yeah, Tacoma, that's my home, from the pines to the dawn. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home. Tacoma, that's my home, place I call my own. Tacoma, that's my home, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home. Alright, you're from the East Coast. Alright, you're from the West. Alright, you're from the middle, but Tacoma's still the best. Alright,